Welcome, everyone, to RB1: a fantasy football podcast, part of the Fake Teams podcast channel. I am the consummate professional. Didn't want the Patriots to go 16-0 anyways, and best friends with the Oracle, your humble host, Pete Rogers. And I am joined by some of the guys. We have the man formerly known as Steve Timberland, caster of the double reverse chutzpah, DK Metcalf's number one admirer, resident old man Clark Barnes, and El Saboteur, captain of the Buccaneers bandwagon, and ring bearer at Aaron Rodgers and Danica Patrick's wedding, the working girl Jordan Smith. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing great, Pete.
Pretty good.
We have to, even though since this is an audio medium, people can't see us right now, but we are all rocking very flattering V-necks for each of us. And so I think that that should be commended and told to the people that all three of these people who you're listening to speak to you, who are about to provide you with expert fantasy advice, look damn good in a V-neck.
Yeah, it's like they say, once guys start doing podcasts together for long enough, they sync up fashion-wise.
Exactly. My V-neck comes with a hood too, which is extra stylish in case it gets cold all of a sudden.
I have one of those, and it just never seems to be right. Like, you have to wear the hood and then a jacket.
Oh, okay.
And the hood kind of gets in the way. I don't know. It's got big buttons on it. It's like the size of a dime. I don't really care for it, but it looks good. So yeah, the sacrifices we make, right, boys?
For fashion. I understand. I love this. I use this hood like I wear this all the time just when I'm around the house, and I do the Kevin Garnett like hood propped on the back of my head, just kind of dangling, not offering really anything, but it's just there for that little bit of warmth that it gives the back of my noggin.
That's the move. You got to keep the neck cool just in case you hear any chilling fantasy takes from this podcast, guys. Just pull the Kevin Garnett /Pete.
Yeah,
keep that neck warm.
Just put the hood right at the cover of the top of your. What is that? It's not the crown.
Covering your bald spot.
There it is. The bald.
I don't know. You look
head.
like you have a beautiful head of hair. I'm not jealous.
Becca is absolutely terrified that I'm going to go bald because my grandfather and my uncle, both on my mom's side, are bald, and I believe that the baldness gene is passed down through men from the maternal side. So Becca's very worried that this will go.
Be a bald.
That it is.
I don't mind being bald. I've shaved my head before. I've gone big before, and it's nice. You feel the air. It breezes through around your scalp, and you're like, "Woo!" I do have some nasty moles in there that I've discovered. So my head does not look as gorgeous as yours, Clark.
I would say it's like getting old. You wouldn't sign up for it, but when it happens, you're okay with it.
You've accepted the fate that comes with it. Just like everyone who's listening to this podcast right now accepts the fact that, hey, the first 3 minutes or 4 minutes of the show, who knows what we're going to talk about?
Right,
we're going to talk about something. Hit that skip button until about 5 minutes in. And then we'll get to football. So let's jump right into it. Week 10 starts and sits. The bye-pocalypse is here. We got all kinds of teams on bye this week, which is going to make your starting lineups all the more exciting. I currently, one of my leagues, have like 7 of my regular starters are all on bye, which is crippling my team right now. So I am in the midst of absolute chaos trying to figure out who I can add off waivers and who I can put into a starting rotation and hope that they're going to give me at least something. So maybe you guys will offer me some names to pay attention to and to snag. So let's jump into it. As we started last week on our spooky, scary starts and sits, we've switched up our methodology to this a little bit. Instead of talking just games, we each have come to the table with 2 to 3 starts and 2 to 3 sits. So we're going to run through. Let's start with the starts. We'll run through them. Jordan, why don't you give us your first start for the week?
My first start for the week is not all that novel. I'm kind of running on a rookie wide receiver notch right here because it's by apocalypse, like you said. But I'm going with Hollywood Brown. I think given that he kind of got a game cushion since he's been back from the injury, now that he should be more useful, especially against the Stinkinati Bengals.
Nice.
And he missed their last game against the Bengals, so we don't really know what he's capable of, but also neither do the Bengals. So they haven't had a game against him, so they can't really prepare for somebody like Hollywood Brown, except for, say, comparing him to, like, I don't know, John Ross or something, but I think he's a little bit better John Ross. Also, there was a development today. This is Wednesday that Drake Kirkpatrick hasn't practiced today. He has been sidelined with a knee injury, which is very interesting because he is not only the best secondary man for Cincinnati, but I think he's probably their best defender, which isn't saying an entire lot. But overall, the Bengals are also 30th in pass defense efficiency, which is not good for a team that looks like they're starting to fire.
Yeah, I like the call. Marquise Brown has had a couple of big games and then has been battling injuries. So I think he's definitely good enough to do it. And we saw a couple of flashes in the big Sunday night game against the Patriots last night. And I especially like this one because I need it to happen. So, Jordan, this is a great
got to speak it into existence. It's crazy. We all know that the Bengals secondary is hot garbage, but if you look at their full season stats, what they've given up to wide receivers so far, they rank 14th best in giving up the fewest points to wide receivers. And then if you switch it to the last 4 weeks, they are giving up the fourth most points to wide receivers. So they started off decently, I guess, or at the very least, the defense was worried about, well, they were getting run on with like no problem. And now things have switched. Now you can throw on them no problem. So I love the play. I think Marquise Brown is going to have a particularly good game.
Yeah, I love. Oh, go ahead, Jordan.
I was just going to say, didn't the Bengals play the Niners in their first matchup?
They might have.
I forget who they played. They played a pretty decent team.
It was the Seahawks that they almost beat.
Oh yeah, that's right. See, and exactly, they almost beat them. I remember thinking that, maybe this team is a little bit scrappy. Maybe they are trying to pull some things together, see what they have, and can compete a little bit. But like you said, over the past month, I think they're just like, nah, we ain't gonna try.
Especially now that the Dolphins have won a game. Gotta get that quarterback, Bengals.
Yeah, I just want to make a note on, I love points allowed to position and just points allowed stats. And Pete, you made a good point of looking at, we've had enough of the season to not just look at the full season. You really kind of look at game by game. And I'm always interested in the bad teams that you look and you're like, wow, they're really not giving up much to wide receiver. Just a little thing that may be really obvious is if you don't have to pass, a lot of teams are content to run. So you always want to make sure that that's not a stat that it's like, they're not giving up any points to wide receivers because in the second half of every game they're down by 3 touchdowns. And
right. That's like the Miami Dolphins MO. Because if you look at the Dolphins, they are giving up the 22nd fewest points to wide receivers. So, kind of middle of the pack. But then when you look at touchdowns, they're giving up the most touchdowns to wide receivers. So,
but a good place to look for, especially for our exercise tonight, for guys looking that you can plug in. You could do a lot worse than picking a team that can't cover a position and just throwing something out there.
Running with it. Well, we'll just start with that then, because one of my starts this week is Zach Pascal, the Colts wide receiver, going up against the aforementioned Dolphins secondary. And obviously, you went and got Zach Pascal with the purpose and intent on playing him, and this is the week to do it. I added him just to help fill in for Bipocalypse. He's become the focal point of the Colts passing game with T.Y. Hilton out and with, Devin Funch has been out the entire year, but he has emerged as that number 2 guy and number 1 guy when Hilton is out, even if it's Jacoby Brissett or Brian Hoyer playing. And things are kind of looking like Jacoby Brissett might be playing. He says his knee's feeling pretty good. Both of those are, above average quarterbacks, I would say. Brian Hoyer, maybe not. But
Hoyer's fine. He's not good, but he's fine. Yeah. He's not going to sink the offense.
Right. Pascal's gone for over 11 PPR points 3 out of his last 5 games. And the biggest thing is he's taken advantage of matchups that are advantageous. So he had huge games against the Falcons, the Raiders, the Texans, and the Steelers. So you like to see the fact that when he has a good matchup, he has exploited it and played well. And of course, like I already said, that rings very good for playing against the Dolphins, who've allowed the most passing touchdowns to wide receivers.
Yeah, and you always, Pete, you were talking about things that you might put up to promote the podcast earlier. With the Zach Pascal endorsement, you can do something fun with like a Pascal's wager thing.
Ooh.
You'll probably be introducing that to a lot of people. But it'll be fun for me, so +1.
Or, if you're just a big Raptors fans, you go Zach Pascal Siakam. Just make that your team name.
Nice.
Maybe a little bit more relevant than the 17th century philosopher. I like
that. A reference that more people will get. Clark making, references that 3.3333% of the podcast gets. Per usual. We all know how it works.
Brandon.
Yeah, exactly. Got to stay on brand.
So, Pete, actually, I wanted to interject with another start since you did Zach Pascal, and it's mostly just staying right with the Colts, especially against the Miami Dolphins with Jacoby Brissett if he gets to play, and that's Chester Rogers. Chester Rogers is like the main slot guy when T.Y. Hilton is not up for it. Hopefully, he'll be seeing a few more snaps this week. He's not heavily targeted otherwise. However, in 2 games where he's been targeted over 5 yards, he scored a touchdown in each of them. So I think he could be a pretty viable weapon. I think they've made it, maybe this is just an Andrew Luck thing, but I think they made it pretty clear this season that Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle aren't going to be the main focal points of the offense. And when they do go to a tight end, it actually does look like it's Jack Doyle a little bit more, which is curious, but might just be Jacoby Brissett's, inclination to go to the wide receivers instead. So Chester Rogers.
Yeah, Rogers has had some good games, and I think the tone here is that it seems like, I don't want to speak for the pod, that we're not concerned about Brissett's injury, and that the Colts have shown, despite some pretty significant injuries to guys like T.Y. Hilton who are incredibly good, this offense is still moving the ball, so still fantasy viable.
Right. And in this week where you're dealing with the Patriots, the Eagles, the Jaguars, the Texans, the Washington Breadsticks, and there's one other team that's on bye too.
The Eagles?
I said them. Damn it. I was doing really good rattling them off. I said that too.
We are not good at this.
You guys are not listening to me.
I don't know. I'm actually pretty good with my leagues in terms of buys.
The Broncos. That's who it is.
That's why you didn't remember.
That's why you didn't remember. That's fair.
Sorry, Broncos Nation. Sorry.
But when you find a good matchup, exploit it in a week like this, especially when guys like Zach Pascal and Chester Rogers are all likely probably available on your waiver wire. So there are great streaming options for a week where you might be rather short at wide receiver.
Which might be another reason for the Colts actually to go with Brian Hoyer this week, because they do have a matchup against the Miami Dolphins. If they feel like he can just go out there and win that game, that's fine. I talked about the Bengals just a few minutes ago. There are 2 teams worse than them in passing efficiency defense. The Atlanta Falcons right behind them, and the Miami Dolphins bottoming out the league. So either way, though, I'm good with Frank Reich and Brian Hoyer.
Yeah. Clark, why don't you give us your first start of the week?
We'll stick with wide receiver, I guess. And I'm looking at A.J. Brown, wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans. And, so the Titans have shown they're not an amazing team, but they've shown that they're solid. And Tannehill has shown that he's not an amazing quarterback, but he is solid. And he is an improvement over Mariota. So in the 3 games with Tannehill, Browns put up 12, 9, and 12 points in PPR. That's 6, 7, and 8 in standard leagues. And these aren't huge numbers, but with the holes that you're going to have to fill this week, A.J. Brown's available. That 21% is after waivers ran this morning. He is super talented, and he is definitely more the possession volume receiver, so he might be a safer bet than Corey Davis, who's a little bit higher owned. And, might not get you much, but will get you enough to get by, and, again, largely available.
Yeah, I actually that was one of my starts, too. Going with the the rookie wide receiver thing. But I'll talk about something a little bit different than it's that with AJ Brown, he's actually sneakily ranked the 23rd in defensive yards adjusted above replacement. So he's basically in good company right behind Keenan Allen and just ahead of Michael Gallup. So if you trust these past few games, 2 out of the last 3, he's led the team in targets and receptions. Then those efficiency numbers for Brown can possibly speak to not just future good performance this coming week, but in upcoming weeks. If AJ Brown is a smart receiver, he could start putting it together towards the end of the season, which is exactly what you need.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems like the Titans receiving core is shaking out into the kind of what we saw with Miami's receiving core, where Devontae Parker, who's the Corey Davis in this situation, is kind of the big play down the field guy who is probably going to see 5 or 6 targets, maybe catches 4 of them for 80 yards and a touchdown on a good day. And then A.J. Brown is developing as that Preston Williams guy who's seeing 7 to 9 targets per game and is really kind of more of the workload of the offense, but doesn't necessarily have the home run big play shot that maybe a Corey Davis or a Devontae Parker has with them, but will still get you solid production. So I like that. We're sticking with wide receivers, man, because one of my starts this week is another wide receiver, Mike Williams versus the Raiders. And the name of the game here is positive regression, because Williams has yet to catch a touchdown this year after catching 10 of them last year. He's coming off of his best game of the season where he had 111 yards against the Packers at home. And the Raiders are giving up the 3rd most touchdowns and 4th most yards to wide receivers. So I think this is a matchup where you're going to see Mike Williams, I think maybe even the whole Chargers offense get back on track, but specifically Williams be able to put up another good production in terms of yardage and then hopefully find that ever elusive red zone and end zone and score you a touchdown.
Yeah, he's proving to be a solid wide receiver. When you see someone putting up tons of yards and not getting in the end zone, it may end up being the 4 touchdown Mike Evans season where he got like 1,100 yards, but that's an incredible oddity. It's like Leonard Fournette's rushing a ton but hasn't scored any touchdowns, and I feel like I hate saying this because it's just based on feel, but like that's going to correct itself.
It's going to fix itself, right? And there's no better time for it to fix itself against the Raider secondary that is just giving away touchdowns for free.
Yeah, I like it. I love any sort of like positive regression sort of situation with wide receivers that get heavy volume, just because once they finally do get that touchdown, it's just like a sweet cherry on top.
Oh yeah. And the thing is it's like you get an extra satisfaction because you made the move to take advantage of it. Like a couple weeks ago, DK Metcalf, who like leads the NFL in red zone targets, but hadn't caught a touchdown yet. And then against who was it? Was it against the Falcons where he caught 2 touchdowns or whatever? Like having that kind of, you're like, do your research, you plug it in, it works, satisfactions all around for everyone. Jordan, have you run out of your starts by now?
No, I actually
rudely jumped Clark and then took Clark's other start. God, Jordan, come back to the podcast and creating all kinds of havoc and chaos.
No, I actually have one other start this week.
Hit us with it.
So it's going to be Curtis Samuel of the Carolina Panthers. I was looking at some numbers, and he does have, I have to say this with a caveat, because he does have a little bit of a hamstring issue right now, which hopefully that works itself out by Sunday. But if not, disregard absolutely everything that I'm saying right now. So right now, Curtis Samuel is basically one of the most efficient rushing receivers in the league, which is a little bit of an oddity, but it's always nice to get those extra padded rushing yard stats. It's almost like a quarterback like Lamar Jackson or Russell Wilson getting those rushing stats. So if he can get you some rushing yards, that's great. He's playing the Packers, who still have a pretty okay defense. They've been dealing with some struggles recently. They're not as hot as they were earlier in the season, but Adrian Amos, their free safety, was added to the injury report today, and the Packers defense has had some issues with stopping some big plays. So Phillip Rivers last week, he was kind of able to sit back on his heels, and the Packers have been okay with getting pressure, but they've just been not hitting home in the past couple of weeks. So if Kyle Allen is able to just sit back there and have some time for things to develop, you could be able to get the ball to Curtis Samuel in a really positive way. And the defensive backs for Green Bay just haven't been playing as great. A lot of teams have been able to figure out how to use Jair Alexander's aggressiveness against him. Kevin King is off and on, like super off and on. So yeah, Curtis Samuel.
I like it.
Yeah, no, and you know that this is a true start, and this is a true start coming from Jordan, because he is speaking ill of his home team. And when you are willing to put your fandom aside to bring the people a honest start, then that's something you need to listen to. So listeners, you need to be starting Curtis Samuel everywhere and anywhere. What about DJ Moore? He's on my team. Should I start him, Jordan? How bad is the Packers secondary? How much do they suck?
Well, mostly I like Curtis Samuel because he had a big day last week,
right?
But he also just looked good while he was playing, and that I predicate a lot of my fantasy crushes on just the eye test, basically. So I am a fantasy a shallow fantasy player.
If it looks good, it feels good.
Yeah, if it looks good, then it's probably great. So yeah, I that's why I'm just crushing on Curtis Samuel right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Clark, you got another start for the week?
Yeah, I've got one, and I've got a question as well. So we touched on the Bengals being terrible earlier, and they're playing the Ravens. So this is a narrative-based start. So if you don't like that, you can hit the fast forward button. I feel like the Ravens are a team less susceptible to letdowns than other teams. So I think that they're just going to continue rolling. The Bengals are a division opponent, but I think the Ravens are just showing that they're just really solid in all aspects of the game. And so I can't imagine them keeping Mark Ingram in there for a full game when they're trouncing the Bengals. So I've got Gus Edwards in there. We talked about picking him up on the pod last week as kind of a preemptive get ready for the playoffs run. And I picked him up as a speculative guy in one league where I don't have Mark Ingram. And I think that he's going to get some run this week. Mark Ingram, he didn't practice today. It's Wednesday. I don't know if that's just because he's 30 and he's tearing it up and he probably doesn't need the extra reps, or if something's going on. But Gus Edwards was 9% owned in CBS leagues and 1% started. I'm not saying this because he got a touchdown last week. I just see him getting more run in this game because the Ravens aren't going to need to really throw their guys out there for the whole 4 quarters again.
Yeah, and again, the matchup is terrific for the ground game. The Bengals are giving up the second most fantasy points to running backs, and we've seen on multiple different games, 2 running backs have solid fantasy productions on the same team against this Bengals run defense.
Additionally, last time the Ravens played the Bengals, Lamar Jackson had like 150 yards on the ground, so you can run on them.
You can do that. And maybe the Bengals will try to stop Lamar, and Lamar will be like, okay, I'm just going to give it to Gus the Bus Edwards, who I will say, I mean, another credit to the pick is that he's had a solid role in this offense all year long. And that role against the Patriots led to a touchdown and I think like 40 some odd yards. So like, it's going to be a consistent workload for him, and it's a matchup that favors him to produce the most with that consistent workload. And if that workload even gets an uptick, then he's gonna well outperform what he's currently kind of expected as. I like it a lot. Plus, this frees me up of since we'd been doing only wide receiver starts. I was like, because I've got 2 left, and one of them I felt lukewarm on, because that's how it said, lukewarm. And it was a running back. And since we hadn't talked about running backs yet, I was like, all right, I'll do my lukewarm take. But instead, since you've already done a running back, Clark, we're going to skip my running back. And instead, I'm going to say, go fire up Ted Ginn this week against the Falcons. He's surprisingly had a solid season in PPR this year. And maybe this is my own biases against guys who I feel like are just burners. And I'm like, there's not enough regular production there to get you fantasy points. He's had above 6 PPR points the last 3 weeks, which is solid numbers for a wide receiver 3 or 4 in my mind, which is kind of what he is. And of course, like Jordan said, and talking about those bottom of the basement pass defense, Atlanta Falcons, they're on that list. I just know that there's like a 50-yard touchdown waiting to happen that Drew Brees is going to bomb to him. And actually, if you look at Ginn's averages against the Falcons across the 11 games that he's played against them, he averages 2.5 catches, 34 yards, and half a touchdown. And he scored each of the last 2 times that the Saints have faced the Falcons. So that's more or less telling you he's going to score a touchdown this week.
Yeah, I always think of Ted Ginn as one of those playing the thirds numbers in roulette. It pays off 3-1 when it hits, but you have a lower chance of anything good actually happening. Ted Ginn's talented. He's the deep threat for an already explosive offense that's hopefully going to be getting Kamara back, playing a horrible team. I gave Ted Ginn a long, hard look on waivers this week. So you could do a lot worse than throwing out somebody who may get you 60 yards and a touchdown just on one play.
And it's the bipocalypse, so you gotta throw whatever you can out there or in an attempt to minimize the damage. Anyone else have more starts before we move on?
I have a question. This is a fun fantasy philosophy question. When you are struggling or when you have a roster spot that you just cannot fill, often you find yourself contemplating two mediocre people on a horrible team. And I'm doing that. So, guys, I got to ask you, should I be dropping Robby Anderson to pick up Jamison Crowder in a PPR league? Yes. And why am I doing this to myself? Why am I the Jets, guys? They're not good. What?
You should definitely do that. I love me some Jamison Crowder, and especially in a PPR league where he's been Sam Darnold's go-to guy and has been receiving all kinds of. Let me do some quick stats and information. Jamison Crowder.
I also just have this bad habit of always wanting the big play person. And I know that that's stupid because if you told me I'll give you 15 or you have a 50% chance of getting 30, it's I'll just take the 15. Right. And I feel like that's what this gamble is. Yeah. But then that's probably giving Robby Anderson too much credit because he's had one good game and Adam Gase doesn't like him.
No, clearly Adam Gase does not like him.
This is what I've been thinking about in meetings all day. So.
Your job is very happy to hear this.
I'm an analyst at work, so this counts.
You're still analyzing.
Right.
Jamison Crowder's been averaging 7 targets the last 4 games and is coming off of an 83-yard game with a touchdown. So I would drop Robby Anderson in a heartbeat for Crowder in a PPR league.
I hope Crowder hasn't been available for too long because you should have swapped them out for a long time ago.
I'm going to have to bid on him. So
okay.
This is a league where we have incredibly short benches and By-Mageddon is hurting someone and he got dropped before that, right? So the short benches make it super interesting and occasionally something like this will happen. I know why the person made the decision and now I'm excited. Sterling Shepard also just got dropped too. Did he get hurt or something?
Yeah, he's banged up with a concussion, I think. Another one.
Oh, okay, never mind.
It's not good. By the way, Clark, it's bipocalypse. We would like to keep the
I wanted to try to branch out. Oh, okay, I'll stop.
No.
So
this isn't your podcast, Clark. This is our podcast. Buy in.
Can we do a quick let's talk about our fantasy leagues segment here?
What else have we been doing? Clark literally just hijacked the podcast to have us tell him to get Jamison Crowder.
Well, it's more of format. So I am actually, Clark, in a fantasy league. I think it's a redraft league with 14 people and 1 QB, 1 flex, otherwise standard everywhere else. But our bench is super shallow too. We have 5 bench spots and an IR spot. Is that kind of how yours is situated?
Yeah, we can only have 2 running backs and only have 2 wide receivers, forced to have an extra kicker in defense and quarterback. So the quarterback waiver wire is super shallow, but we start 3 running backs and wide receivers too. I actually like it. It's kind of challenging to operate under these odd conditions.
No, I hate it so much. I despise it. For a new reason I discovered this year. Last year, it was because I was this is just me being the football nerd. I'm having a short bench and then having to make these decisions to put good players on the waiver wire is it's helping out the people who just don't draft very well. So screw them. I want to be able to draft well and go in with my team into the season. But this year, I discovered that it actually feels like it's been limiting people's trade opportunities. I don't think there's been 1 trade that I know of because it was completed by me before the season even started. It was a 1-for-1. I traded Cam Newton for Lamar Jackson. That's a win.
Whoa!
Just bragging on that.
Jesus. That person is now hates everything about what happened to them.
Actually, I'm 4-5 right now, so I can't brag that much.
Okay.
But either way, because there's options on the waiver wire. There's like 0 trade interaction. So it's kind of like the team you got is the team you got, and you're pretty much stuck with it.
Yeah, I mean, in those leagues, a really good strategy, kind of a good strategy in all leagues is try to package the 2-for-1 and the 3-for-2. Not only do you usually come out with a superior player, but it lets you feel a lot better about making those pickups. And there's a lot of value out on the waiver wire all the time.
Yeah, but I feel like people just don't have any sort of inkling to trade anybody because they're like, well, why would I trade? Because then that makes me weak in this area, or I'm not getting as good a value back in this one. I don't have somebody on my bench who I'm like, oh yeah, I have 4 good running backs. Let me trade one of these guys. You can get better at running back. I can get better at wide receiver, tight end, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. It frustrates me. So that's what I'm saying.
That's what you're saying. That's the point that's made. All right. Well, before we get into sits, let's take a quick ad break and don't go anywhere. Not only will we be giving you sits, but Clark is going to be telling us the best wide receiver number. All right. We are back. And now Clark has had hours to brainstorm what the best number a wide receiver can wear is. Clark, what is your answer? It's the most aesthetically pleasing, or whatever your justification
88?
For best is.
I think 88. It's alliterative. It rhymes.
It rhymes because it's the same word twice.
Still technically rhymes.
Still technically a rhyme. That's true. I'm sorry.
It's alliterative for the same reason too. While we're on the topic,
I do like 88 how it looks. 88 through Des Bryant, Michael Irving. It's just
I hate it. Never mind. I'm changing my answer. 83. I don't care.
Oh, 83.
What was Randy Moss? Whatever he was.
81. 81 is 81. When he was with the Patriots. 81 is a classic because you also have Megatron in it. I feel like that was the number that I grew up as, like the deep threat big body guy was always 81. That was the number one receiver. Anquan Bolden was 81. Oh yeah, that's a nice one. Jordan, what's the best number for a wide receiver to wear?
The best number for a wide receiver is 17.
I like it.
No homerism here.
No in particular in mind.
Just generally.
Have you noticed that no wide receivers wear like numbers in the 80s anymore?
Yeah. The Ringer did like a whole article about it.
It's super weird.
It is really weird.
I didn't realize it until I didn't see the Ringer article, but I think somebody tweeted it that there's like, yeah, nobody wears numbers in the 80s anymore. And I'm like, what? Oh, yeah, sure. Unless they're a tight end.
Unless they're a tight end. Yeah. Something about the 80s making you look big when it's on your chest. I don't know.
I mean,
things up.
You might want that though.
I always had to wear 44 in basketball because that was always the jerseys were done by size, right? Mm-hmm. So like all the 12s were the little guys. I was always a big guy. So
I like 44 as a basketball number. I like the 40s because I always associate because the Celtics have so many retired numbers that like basically big men always universally wear in the 40s, 42, 45. And so I have a special association with that. 42, Al Horford for the Celtics. Beautiful number.
Number talk tonight on the RB1 podcast.
This is the reason why you come here. All right, let's get into some sits. And let me quickly scroll up my notes because Clark and Jordan, y'all both said to start AJ Brown, which is great. Good for you guys. But I am not buying into a popular streaming option in this game, which is Ryan Tannehill against the Chiefs. He's been a name that I've seen a lot thrown around as like a potential bipocalypse fill-in. I'm not entirely sold. The Chiefs are giving up the 10th most points to quarterbacks, but their pass defense is 4th in DVOA. And I think their rankings in terms of fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks has been inflated over the last 2 games versus Kirk Cousins, who threw 3 touchdowns, and then Aaron Rodgers, who threw 3 touchdowns. But if you look at the 3 games before that, you had Joe Flacco, who threw for 213 yards with no touchdowns, Deshaun Watson, who threw for 280 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks, and then Jacoby Brissett, who threw for 151 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. I don't think Ryan Tannehill is on par with Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers, so I wouldn't expect that production from him. I'd much more expect the maybe 200 some odd yards and maybe a touchdown. Not to say that that's a kibosh on AJ Brown, who I think is probably would see the vast majority of those 200 yards passing. But I don't think that Tannehill is this like lock and loaded, plug him in if you need a quarterback to stream for the Bipocalypse kind of player this week.
Bold.
It's bold. We're just Clark. Honestly, tell me that you never thought that you would be saying sitting Ryan Tannehill is bold. When did you ever think that you would be saying that sentence?
Also true. It's the against the Chiefs part. So you really came with the numbers, and it's making me question just my random thoughts on it. But yeah. You make a good point.
I mean, but like it could be we looked at the last 3 weeks, and it could not just be because Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins have been playing really well. It could be that the Chiefs defenses, their secondary hasn't been as strong. I don't know. Or maybe teams with the return of Chris Jones have stopped being able to run the ball as much, and now they're passing more on the Chiefs defense because like we talked about on the earlier set, you can only use the stats that you get.
Yeah, some people were baffled, some people, including myself, why the Vikings went away from their strength, which is Kansas City.
So weakness. Annoying. I
do not think the Titans will do that.
No.
If they can run, they will. And so that would be another good, point in your favor of, when Nick's not here, I can say nice things about Derrick Henry. That may be another point in the favor of Derrick Henry for this one.
Yeah. Yeah. I was very upset. I bought a lot of stock in the Vikings backfield last week in DFS, and they all let me down. I was very upset by that.
Look, if I'm streaming a quarterback in Bipocalypse, it's going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick. So
that's who I'm streaming, baby. Live and die by the beard.
Fitzmagic is back.
Fitzmagic is back and throwing touchdowns to Clark's Devontae Parker.
You know what? He's had 2 good games. So at minimum, he can have 3 good games. So this is the third.
This is his third game, and then he's just going to have an epic collapse.
Then he's done. Then get rid of him.
Then drop him. Pick up Nick Foles instead because Gardner Minshew is over. Well, shed a tear for that. Clark, who's a sit for you this week?
Speaking of the Dolphins, this one isn't incredibly bold, and with everyone on bye, I'd call it more of a shy away than a sit. But I wouldn't invest a lot in Kalen Ballage this week, just because he's not really that good. And I know we're excited about him because he is a starting running back for someone, but it's a shy away. If you have to play him, okay, because the starting running back can fall into the end zone and get you a touchdown and make your week. But I just really hope people haven't forgotten kind of what he's looked like. He's really one-dimensional. I think we should really be looking at who the Dolphins have brought in Bo Scarborough to their practice squad, and if he gets promoted to the team, I will definitely be making hopefully a preemptive cheap pickup before he gets into action and people see like, oh, this guy's pretty good.
Yeah, and Miles Gaskin, who I think is like a 6th round rookie that that is now backing him up. No,
I don't think Ballage is gonna light up the world. And
yeah. I wrote an article for Fake Teams with a streaming option at each position for during the Bipocalypse, and I had Galen. Yeah, that's right. Kalen.
With a K.
Galen. What is this? Kalen Ballage as my pick at running back, and I wrote this early this morning, and throughout the day I've just become progressively more and more less and less sure of that pick. Because while I picked it because it's like he's a starting running back, you can get him off waivers. I'm also now I don't necessarily know that he's gonna do that much this week.
And Colts are pretty stout on D.
Yeah,
they're not lights out, but they are solid. So it's reversed the kind of general thought that we had on the Colts for kind of the past decade. Is they're pretty good. So Miami may not bounce after their victory.
Yeah, this isn't Chase Edmonds coming in to fill in for David Johnson. This is a running back who is really kind of a bummer because I kind of liked him coming out of Arizona State when he was a rookie. But he was a starting running back this season. Then he wasn't the starting running back this season, and it was not because of injury. He lost his job for a reason. Part of that, I can't blame on him fully because he does play for the Miami Dolphins, and they have not had a decent offensive line in years. But the other part is that he's just not the best option. He's the only option right now. And sometimes opportunity is king, but Kalen Ballage, we've already seen him get the opportunities and do nothing with them. So don't get too excited about him being starter again.
Yep, that's a good call. For everyone who read my article on fake teams and took it to heart, ignore it now.
We'll still read it and retweet it.
Still give me clicks, but
there's other things in there.
There's other things. Yeah, there are other players I talk about, all of whom are right. Jordan, who's a sit for you this week?
Sit for me this week. This one is a little tough because there are not a lot of other options for the go ahead here, but I am going to consider, if you have him, sitting Jared Goff against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've seen in recent weeks Minkah Fitzpatrick just be like a lingering pick six waiting to happen,
like a first round pick spent on like a key point to a rebuilding team that you would want in your secondary.
Exactly. He's the shiny new car when the basement of your house has flooded. Jared Goff has not looked that great. He's had the bye week to kind of get things correct, but going to Pittsburgh is a tough ask, especially when, they just have a really great home crowd. They've been playing pretty decently so far. And also, staying on brand from the earlier episode this week, the Northeast might get a little snow this weekend. So keep your eyes out on the radar. If it's snowy, I would be weary about starting both Goff and Mason Rudolph because they would both are very capable and have the players to just turn and start handing the ball off, which is what I expect they would do. So keep your eyes on that weather report, folks.
Yeah, I like this play a lot. The Pittsburgh the defense, I think, has been underrated through the last couple of weeks and has really started to take big strides forward. And we've seen Jared Goff have struggles this week, or not this week, but this season. And I like it. I like it. It's a tough call because I don't necessarily, there are some options out there who maybe you can start over Goff, who you'd feel mildly comfortable with. But I think ultimately the play is right to maybe sit him this week, take someone who maybe has a little bit of a risk to them, but trust that they're going to still outproduce Goff in what could be a tough game for the Rams offense. Excellent. Another set that I've got, I am not sure that Kenyan Drake is going to back up his huge Thursday night game against the 49ers with another big game against the Buccaneers, especially since Tampa is allowing the second fewest fantasy points to running back. And David Johnson came out today saying he's definitely playing this week, which is going to mean a reduced role for Drake and a tough matchup. And I'm not starting him with the expectation that he's going to produce like he did last week. And I'm not even going to start him because I don't really think that there's going to be a reliable fantasy workload there for him, especially since the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense is awful against the pass. And so I would expect a big Kyler Murray day, and I would expect a big Christian Kirk day and a big Larry Fitzgerald day. But I would think that means that, and maybe David Johnson in the passing game, but with David Johnson returning, I'm not buying stock in Kenyan Drake. We having a great part two. That's not it. Encore.
Yeah, I like it. Tampa Bay has been pretty tough against the run, and they have just been giving it up through the air. We know the Cardinals want to pass, which doesn't mean that the running backs won't be involved. But this will be, it's a tough one, but we're trying to give out some tougher sits. So if you're struggling, I do like the idea of, maybe breaking ties against them.
Yeah, you hope that Kenyan Drake was a handcuff that you were able to get while your David Johnson was out. The thing is, Kenyan Drake's not exactly a change of pace running back when he's paired with David Johnson. They kind of do the same things in that they are home run hitting backs who can catch passes out of the backfield. And also if Christian Kirk is playing, that means targets to him and various other wide receivers in the receiving corps. So Kenyan Drake he's risky this week to get valuable production.
Yep. Clark, you got another sit for the week?
I have another shy away, and this one's a bit more bold than my first one. You mentioned the weather in the Northeast with the Pittsburgh game, and Juju's also going to be facing Jalen Ramsey, so I'm going to shy away from JuJu Smith-Schuster if I possibly can this week. If you've got a bevy of wide receivers and you've been struggling with who to start and having a hard time breaking ties one way or the other, I think this is going to be a good week to sit Juju. Not that he's not great or that he's not getting the ball with the new quarterback, but Jalen Ramsey is legit extremely good, and they may force feed him the ball against Ramsey, but man, I would be looking somewhere else if I was Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, no, I love this play because I think Juju has gotten to the point now where we've seen him have very solid / pushing strong fantasy games against really bad opponents, really bad defenses. But when he's against a really good defense or against a really tough matchup like Jalen Ramsey, I mean, how much faith do you have? Like if it was Ben Roethlisberger, how much faith would you have Ben Roethlisberger getting the ball to JuJu Smith-Schuster against Jalen Ramsey, let alone how much faith do you have Mason Rudolph getting the ball to him? So I like this. I like the play. I don't even think that this is something to be cautious about. I think this is a pretty confident he should be on your bench this week.
Yeah, Jalen Ramsey has also had an extra week to just kind of hang around the Rams facility. I'm not sure how much of a difference in defensive playing style he'll be playing with the Rams. Probably pretty similar. I think he's going to be playing more man coverage. But the Rams should honestly just pull a New England Patriots and have Jalen Ramsey just cover whomever the number 2 wide receiver is going to be in Pittsburgh, which will basically just eliminate a target or basically a side of the field, and then double team JuJu Smith-Schuster. Like, because why not?
Yeah. I do think it means it will probably be a big game for Jalen Samuels if he's fully healthy, because we saw the fact that Mason Rudolph just loves to check the ball to him and let him do his thing.
Well, it'll be a good game for it. Just let those guys on the Rams defensive line come on through, and lots of screens, a lot of passes out wide, quick hitters. So
James Conner might be back though.
Oh, intriguing.
Potential. I think he might be a game time decision.
Ugh, those are the worst. Jordan, why don't you wrap us up with your final sit for the week? Unless Clark has 3. I don't think so. No, cool.
My final sit for the week, I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to speak on this, but it's going back to rookie wide receivers, and it's sitting the young rookie DK Metcalf because he's going up against a really good defense, the San Francisco 49ers. I think that this is probably a classic NFC West matchup where they're just going to be bashing each other's heads in. And if Russell Wilson is not being thrown to the ground by guys like Terron Armstead and Nick Bosa, then he's probably going to be looking for his favorite target, Tyler Lockett. I'm not sure he'll have a whole lot of time for plays to develop to DK Metcalf, which is DK Metcalf running like 60 yards down the field. He's been a touchdown monster, but he hasn't been extremely efficient. He's all the way down in Demarcus Robinson and Danny Amendola territory for defensive yards, or defensive adjusted yards above replacement at 43rd. So I think there are other possible streaming options. He's a super hit or miss risky flex at this point in the game.
I've been nodding my head the entire time. I absolutely love this play. I think that sitting DK Metcalf is 100% the right way to go, because we've seen these two teams battle it out, and they are vicious.
I disagree, but I do have 2 notes. Touchdown Monsters sounds like a good but difficult Halloween costume for next year if you're planning early.
Nice.
And also,
full 51 weeks ahead of time.
I'm kind of a 3-part prediction, and it's just kind of if you were waiting for it, guys, here it is, getting up on my soapbox. When Seattle beats the 49ers this week, it does not mean that the 49ers are a fraud, and you are going to look stupid when you tweet that out. So there you go.
I can't wait for the "Are we sure they good" tweets.
It's going to be the best. Just
don't click on that stuff. Like if you see this and it bothers you, don't click on that stuff. And when you see someone constantly putting stuff out like that, just mute them. Mute, by the way, is the best tool. Mute is the best tool on Twitter because you're just ignoring the person. Blocking them is active. They can see it. It's like, oh, I'll show you. But muting is just ignoring them. And people on Twitter want attention. So it is literally the best thing you can do if you want to fight back. # use the mute.
You even have it.
You heard it here first. There we go. We got them all.
Oh, Clark's brush with social media has gone so well. All right. Well, there you go. Those are all of our starts and sits. But don't think that this podcast is over quite yet because, you guys, it is time. She is batting 100 this season. Hasn't been wrong.
Sorry, Pete. I let you do it last week. It's batting 1,000. Batting 100 means you're 1 in 10. Betting 1,000 means you're 100%.
I saw that in a tweet too, and I was like,
"Oh, it's okay." I can't let you keep doing it, Pete. Because I love
thank
you. I'm helping.
Thank you, Clark. You are helping. She's batting 1,000. I'm batting 100.
I'm old enough to know baseball statistics.
I know. I even tweeted that. I was like, she's batting 100 so far. And I was like, well, clearly now I don't know baseball. But we're going to get the Oracle on the line because the Oracle has not been wrong yet this season and every prediction we've thrown her way. And we actually have a listener who wrote in for their start-sit conundrum that they've been dealing with. So we're going to propose it to the Oracle and see what she thinks is going to happen.
While we're waiting for this, so I'm looking for a Houston Chronicle article that I want to read. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hey, I am looking for the services of the Oracle.
Oh, the Oracle is here, but also a sidekick or two.
Oh, okay. Who are the sidekicks?
Sidekick is your father, who knows maybe even less than
I would go as far to say is certainly less.
And the other one is Trudy the dog.
Oh, perfect. Well, she might be the most intelligent of the group of you guys in terms of football. She's watched the most football with me, I would say.
But only because she can't speak.
But only right. Well, I will say, Mom, I have learned from Clark that batting 100 is not right, but you are batting 1,000 so far this season.
Wow. I've been right every time?
Undefeated.
Wow. You must be setting me up for success here.
I am not. We are giving you tough questions. And in fact, this week we have a listener who wrote in a question. So this is their start-sit dilemma, and you're going to tell us which of these two players they should start. Okay?
Okay.
All right, here we go. So should they start David Montgomery, who's the running back for the Bears, versus the Detroit Lions, or Mark Ingram, running back for the Ravens against the Bengals? Now, I know you like to have a little bit of background, so let me give you these numbers for you to think about, to let it percolate in your brain.
Now, I usually prefer like a life story kind of background versus numbers.
Okay, all right. I'll give you a life story.
Narrative,
Montgomery.
I love it.
Yeah, narrative. It's all about the narrative.
It's all about the narrative.
David Montgomery is the rookie running back for the Chicago Bears, who has, over the last few games, broken out in a big way and has finally shown the potential that the team thought that he had by drafting him. And he also is the team's best option on offense because their quarterback is garbage. And the Lions' run defense is one of the worst in the NFL, so that there's a big chance for him to have a big game. Meanwhile, Mark Ingram, who plays for the Baltimore Ravens, a team famous for running the football. However, he has competition nipping at his heels. He's an older back, and they might use this game against the Bengals, who are also terrible, to rest him up for a playoff push while the younger running back behind him gets a little bit more touches. But both have a chance to have very big outings this week. But which one's going to produce the Oracle? What is your verdict?
Well, so I have to say the younger guy, what's his name?
David Montgomery.
David Montgomery sounds really good. But being an old person myself, I got to root for the old guy to hang in there. And also, living in the land of Tom Brady, you got to root for these aging ball players who are still performing.
This is the Oracle casually dropping the name Tom Brady because that's the one football player she knows.
Hopefully I got it right.
You nailed it. You did great, Oracle. So your vote in this start-sit dilemma is to start Mark Ingram against the Bengals.
Yep, that's it.
Excellent. Thank you, Oracle, for another
You're
successful
welcome.
fantasy advice session.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So in one fell swoop, the Oracle has told you to start Mark Ingram and destroyed Clark's claim that Gus Edwards is worth starting this week.
I like it. We're facing off.
Boom. It's going to be a battle. Who will bat 100 after this week? You stay tuned and find out.
I'm putting money on your mom, I feel like.
I need to start creating more rich narratives for her to latch on to.
Just start making up really random stories. Give them really random backstories. So David Montgomery, he's from Tallahassee. He wasn't originally in the league. He came up through the XFL after he was working in a lobster shack. But he made it to Chicago, the land of bears.
That was pretty good. Maybe you should be doing this.
I've had a lot of time in the past 15 seconds to think about it. So.
Excellent. All right. Well, there you go. So at Stilly Ryan, who sent us that start sit question, there's your answer. The play from the Oracle is Mark Ingram. That is it for the show. Make sure to subscribe on everywhere you get your podcasts. iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, the whole 9 yards. Leave us a review. Give us 5 stars. We'd love to hear from you. So if you want to send praise or maybe some constructive feedback, feel free to drop it in the comments on when you subscribe. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at RB1 Podcast. Follow myself at Pete M. Rogers. Follow Clark at NFL Clark and Jordan at Jordan_Smith27. We will be back at you next week. Everyone out there, enjoy, and I hope you survive Bipocalypse. And until then, peace.